is Court Storming with your host, Perry Sook.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Court Storming, episode 7. Guys, what an up and down week for the Johnnies. You get out, you start Big East play with a dominant performance. Defense looks good for the third game in a row. You go to Kentucky, you have a first half, and everything looks good there too. And then at halftime, I think the team forgot to come out of the locker room, and 2 players did come back out of the locker room for the Wildcats, and it was all downhill from there as the Johnnies drop that one to fall again at the hands of an SEC team. Only Ole Miss, the only team they've beaten since 2012 from the conference. Joining me now is a very, very special guest, Roger Rubin from Newsday. Roger was down in Atlanta and also there for the DePaul game at Carnesecca. So, Roger, let's start on a slightly happy note. You get the Big East opener. You don't know how the team's going to do because they had some offensive woes coming into that game. And then all of a sudden, Dylan Darling finds his shot 2 days after Coach said that he was going to work with him and correct his shot. And it turns out he kind of did. So what did you like about that game against DePaul? And thank you very much for joining me on World Basketball Day here.
Well, you're very welcome. I also want to wish you and all of your viewers happy holidays. Hope everyone is having a good one, and hope everyone has a great new year. Yes, it's you're entirely welcome. I'm glad to be here on that day. It was a little surprising because Darling played only a handful of minutes the game before, and Coach Pitino was pretty rough on him after the game, and said that he was going to need to rebuild his shot. And I'm under the impression that they really started sort of from the ground up. But in 2 days, he had the guy, making threes and confident about taking them. And he basically said that the key element of remaking his 3-point shot had to do with the arc on the ball, that he was shooting it flat, got a little bit more arc on it, and that seemed to unlock his potential on the arc.
Yeah, we saw one go in right there. And what I loved about this game is you and I talked on the first episode of Court Storming that the offense just kind of flows better when Dylan Darling's on the floor. Would have liked to see what happened in that Alabama game had he been able to play. But, in his words, he wasn't able to get a drop of, water into the ocean, just could not hit anything. So to see that shot actually fall a little bit as he stepped into Big East play for the first time, I thought was actually very gratifying. I actually did get a chance to talk to Dylan after his big breakout performance, and we're going to go ahead and take a quick listen to that.
Dylan, you have been very candid with, your shooting woes early in the season. How gratifying was it to go out and have that performance tonight?
It was pretty cool. It brings a smile to my face. It was a relief to see a couple go in, and ultimately just happy to get out of here with the W.
Yeah, 3 for 5 from 3, massive. 2 of those as soon as you stepped into the game. Coach said after the Iona game that he was going to work with you on your shot. Can you talk us through what that process was like?
Yeah, he just told me to overemphasize my arc. We both felt like everything was short, and I just really wasn't giving myself a chance for the ball to go in. So the past 2 days, we've got a lot of extra reps in, and we just overemphasized arc. And going into the game, that was something that was in the back of my mind, and just letting it fly, put arc on it, and a couple went in.
The big question for all of the transfers who weren't in the Big East is, how are they going to fit into Big East play? Well, here you got your first taste of it. Just how did it feel to you being out there in a true Big East game?
Yeah, it was good. It was physical. It was fun. It was everything that they made it out to be, and just happy to get the W and on to the next one.
Now, you guys are already in your penultimate game here at Carnesecca. How strange is that for you, playing your first year for St. John's, and this is your second to last game here on their true home court with all the other games on MSG?
Yeah, I love the games here. I have no complaints. As cool as MSG is, you can't beat it, but I love playing here. It's a great environment, and it just feels like a true college home game.
Yeah, so Roger, unfortunately for me, I think that's where the positives in this show end, because that was a great night. I was happy to see Ian Jackson, have another game in the starting position, get to double digits again, in the post haircut era, and I was happy to see Dylan Darling have a great night and 45% from the field, 45% from three, and then the Kentucky game happened, and it was as messy as it could possibly be for the first half, but the Johnnies edging them out in the rock fight, and then halftime hits and everything goes awry. Just nothing. It was like the Auburn meltdown all over again. You were there in Atlanta. I mean, and they call it Catlanta, and it sounded like that on the TV. I unfortunately was not able to make the trip. Just what did you hear from, the fans and the energy? When did you know that the Johnnies were in trouble in that one?
Well, I think that the place where it's most noticeable is the possessions where they only get one shot, followed by possessions where Kentucky, even if it misses its first shot, gets a second chance. So the failure to get a defensive rebound and end the other team's possession, plus, what we were used to seeing a year ago was a voracious rebounding team that got all kinds of second chance points. That's not who these guys are right now. And, when they're only getting one shot per possession and they're not shooting it well, and they were not shooting it well. That's a big sign that there's going to be a problem. Kentucky's point guard came back from he was in the game early, and then he's back after missing a bunch of games with a shoulder injury. He seemed to come out of the game with a shoulder injury just 4 minutes into the game, but he did come back in the second half, and he was the catalyst for them. He guided them through. That was Jalen Lowe, and I mean, in 15 odd minutes in the game, Kentucky outscored St. John's by 20 points. It made a very big difference.
Yeah, Jalen Lowe just came back. When he went down with a shoulder injury, I knew that it was going to be obviously beneficial for the Johnnies, because we saw what this Kentucky team is, and I do want to emphasize twice now. I think with Ole Miss and Kentucky, the version of that team that they are being rated against is not the version of that team that they are playing, because the Ole Miss team that played at Madison Square Garden was as invigorated as you could ever possibly be to play this St. John's team, and the Kentucky team had him, and then obviously the debut of their big man, who's a top 10 projected draft pick, coming into this. And when he came back out from the shoulder injury, I mean, it was just unbelievable, the turn in effort there. I mean, the Johnnies go 17 minutes with only 4 field goals, have 9 scoreless minutes, 8 turnovers, and 8 field goals entirely in the second half. And then the rebound game just shot out of the question. So when it comes to this, is the point guard the biggest problem? Because you see, it was the LeBaron Philons of the world who came on and lit the world up for Alabama. And now Jalen Lowe, even this Kentucky team with Jaden Quaintance, playing, making his debut, and not playing that long, but dominating every time he was on the floor, 10 points and almost a double-double. When Lowe was on the floor, they couldn't do anything to stop them. So what are the Johnnies, do they have to find a point guard? I love you talked to him after the game, and he said, hey, I said we didn't have to have a point guard because we didn't have a point guard, and I was making the best of a bad situation. But now here we are that every time they play against a good point guard, there's a problem. So what is the fix here, Roger?
Well, as Rick Pitino told us all, Tiny Archibald isn't walking through that door. But anyway, yes, I would say that point guard is the biggest problem that they have right now, and how to address it is I think what they've decided to basically do is let Ian Jackson do the job, grow into it. Certainly Dylan Darling is going to get playing time at that position. Maybe the two of them can play together because, Jackson, his natural position has been shooting guard. But, they aren't going to, somebody isn't going to show up and be their new point guard. That said, and I will come back to that, but it's not the only problem. a big problem is the lack of physicality and the problem with rebounding. Because as I told you, when the rebounding, when they're not ending an opponent's possession with a defensive rebound, when they're letting opponents take second shots the way that Kentucky did, that's something that needs to be addressed. And they haven't been very physical. Last year's team, was really tenacious on the boards, and it compensated for a flaw that they had, which was that team couldn't shoot outside. And they overcame that flaw with the defense and the rebounding. This point guard thing is a flaw that they're going to need to, overcome. Now, that being said, what they have left is a game against Harvard and then 19 conference games. And do I think that they have enough at point guard to be successful in a whole bunch of those Big East games? Yes, I do. And I do think that, like against DePaul, Dylan Darling has enough game to be a productive point guard against many of the Big East teams. But there are going to be much more critical Big East games coming up because there aren't that many good quad one opportunities inside the conference. So road game in Omaha against Creighton is going to be big. Both games against UConn are going to be big. And the question is, does Darling have enough game to excel in those situations? And, that's a big question mark. But, Jackson, I think, is very capable. I mean, he had 10 points. He led the team in rebounds against Kentucky with 6. He was 4 of 7 shooting, while the top 3 scorers on the team were an aggregate 7 for 27. So yeah, I mean, I think that Jackson can grow into the position, but it's not ideal that they're playing a guy at point guard who's really not a point guard.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think that the growth has been there. Rick even said it, that, besides the fact that he refuses to box out, that there has been exponential growth in everywhere. And it needs to happen too, because last week I was talking with Kevin that, the team the offense kind of goes as Sellers goes. And when the point guard is getting jammed and then he's not getting shot opportunities, well, he only made 9 and it doesn't make the box score. We are going to take a listen. Rick also addressed that it was his fault that the point guard position was not solved in free agency, for lack of a better word. So let's go ahead and listen to what Rick had to say.
That's a big factor with us right now, and it's our fault as a staff not having a big-time physical point guard. So it's something that we look at, but we've got to make sure that we do it with other players. We're not going to the offensive glass and getting the missed shots back. So we got to keep on working on that. So to answer your question, no, I'm not disappointed. That's not my job to be disappointed or elated. My job is tomorrow to make the team better.
Yeah, and we will see if he can indeed do that. We are going to take a quick break right here on Court Storming because, as Roger said, point guard is not the only problem, and we want to dive into exactly what else is going wrong in Johnny Land just before we hit that panic button. So we will take a quick break, and we'll see you when Court Storming returns.
Welcome back to Court Storming with Perry Sook.
All right, everyone, welcome back. As we said, the point guard is certainly a problem for the Red Storm, but it is not the only problem. So we are going into the segment I'm going to call Blame Game. Where does the blame of this all lie? Because there's a lot of things going wrong, and it's interesting to hear Rick take some accountability on that with not getting the players they went. And he actually had even a little more to add to that post-game, and when he got into it with our very good guest, who we will welcome right back in a minute, Roger Rubin. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what else Rick had to say about where the problems lie with this team after the game.
We got to just become much stronger. I can't do anything about the point guard spot, but we can do a better job with the backboard. We can do a better job of executing, blocking out, because we gave up 16 so many times. Like, Ian's getting much better, but he refuses to block out. Refuses on switches, and that's costing us a little bit. But he's getting much better in all the other areas. So that's, I think, as he keeps improving, if we can get some wins, we'll have ourselves a respectable point guard.
So, Roger, as we said, Ian Jackson is moving in the right direction. And thank you. Welcome back to Court Storming. Thank you again for joining us right before the holidays. But that is not the only problem. there are other problems with this team, and the out rebounding that continues to happen on a regular basis, the out physicality, or being out physicaled, is a massive problem. And then one thing that just keeps pinging in my ear every time I hear it. This team apparently has a problem adhering to a scouting report. You go back to Alabama, Zuby said, we had a plan. We just couldn't execute what the coaches wanted us to do. You go back to the Bucknell game, which was almost a 50-point win. And what did he say at halftime? Hey, we gave you the scouting report. You got to stick to it and actually do what we said. And then once again, Zuby, after this game, said the coaching staff put us in a good position to win with the plan. We didn't execute. And to me, that drives me nuts because I know it's not Zuby Ejiofor. I know Zuby Ejiofor is doing what he's told. Nobody wants to win more than him. So where in all of these problems, Roger, do you find the biggest problems, and what of it do you think is solvable?
Well, if we're going to talk about the scouting reports, that is a thing that Coach Pitino brought up many times last season before that team started to get hot. And, Zuby Ejiofor is an interesting guy to have some commentary on it because he's one of the guys who, in the end last season, was catching on. The problem may be that the new guys are not used to getting as detailed a scouting report as the St. John's coaching staff provides them, and that they might be having problems with that. Do I think that can improve? I do think it can improve. If anything, I expect from St. John's, I expect them to be highly motivated the rest of the way because there isn't much margin for error in terms of, getting decent NCAA tournament positioning. Now, another thing that Coach Pitino has brought up is the lack of physicality. Mm-hmm. He doesn't feel like his guys are getting physical. And, one of the things that we heard about last year's team from virtually every opponent they faced after Christmas was that, they play so hard, it's tough to, deal with it, keep up with it, be as physical as they are. And, no one's saying that about this team. I think a lot of people expected Bryce Hopkins to be a more physical player, a better rebounder. His rebounds are down. His turnovers are up. It's sort of a question mark. Coach Pitino keeps talking about wanting him to take on the mindset of the alpha dog. I'm not sure how much people's personalities can change during a college basketball season, particularly someone who's already 22 years old. However, when I asked him about this after the game in Atlanta, he said, yeah, it can happen. He thought that Kadari Richmond last season became a much tougher player as time went on. And Kadari Richmond was a fully developed guy who had been playing college basketball for years. So maybe it is something that's possible.
Yeah, no, he says, that Mamba mentality, that alpha, he's good, but I want him to be great. And the rebounds, I'm glad you pointed it out because Rick has even said, hey, the thing that's going to make you stand out to NBA scouts is getting that rebounds in the 13, 14 range. The points will come and go as they do. And this front court we thought was the big emphasis. We're sitting here worrying about the point guard because there has yet to emerge a consistent one that can be there. But this front court is getting out physicality, and it's not Zuby Ejiofor. Zuby's getting doubled. So who is going to step up? If it's not Bryce, then maybe it's got to be Dylan Mitchell. But then Dylan Mitchell's playing point forward a little bit sometimes to take the alleviation off. So definitely some problems here. The one thing that I was happy about is for 3.5 games, we got some good defense, which shows that there is coachability with this team. The other thing I can be happy about is that between, Dylan Darling and between Ian Jackson, they are developing, because now it's Big East play. Besides Harvard, 2 days before Christmas, it's Big East play. And Dylan Darling had his Big East debut. Yes, it's a bottom of the Big East team, but he made that and he had his best game as a Johnny. So that is going to continue to grow. The problem is now you're out of runway. You made this massive out-of-conference slate that was 6-4. Now, there is the good news that you actually posted about yesterday, that the Baylor, because of their metrics, is now a quad 1 win because they had moved up in the metrics. But you swung and a miss on pretty much everything else. And you're coming out 6-4, best case scenario, 7-4 in out-of-conference play. So how many Big East games do you have to win to get this team back to where we thought they were going to be? Can you even get it back to where we thought they were going to be?
It's an interesting question that you raise. Can they get back to where we thought they were going to be? I'm not sure that they can do it in the regular season unless they sweep Connecticut in the two regular season games. Um, there aren't that many quad one opportunities for wins, although that's kind of a moving target because people's nets change as their opponents that they've played win and lose, and how they do. And there are a lot of opportunities for like a Baylor to move its way up during the Big 12 season, a lot of opportunities for Ole Miss to move its way up during the SEC season. But, this is the big picture problem is they didn't get a signature non-conference win. And now they have to make their hay in the Big East. And the games against Connecticut are going to be vital. Do I think that St. John's isn't going to run into a team as athletic and tough, I don't think, in the Big East outside of Connecticut, as they ran into with Alabama, and their guards were much more athletic than St. John's were. Auburn's also. There was a certain toughness about Iowa State, that St. John's didn't match. With Kentucky, they were longer and more athletic, and St. John's couldn't really do anything with that. I don't think they're going to run into those things outside of the Connecticut games in the conference. I think St. John's is a better team than, 9 of the teams. I just don't know if they're better than Connecticut. And so if they're going to get back to, where they might be a 4 seed or something like that, you're going to have to score some points against Connecticut. And if you lose, it's such a difficult situation. There's a lot of pressure because losing a game in the Big East against a team that's not Creighton or Connecticut could really cost you. And you don't want to have a bad loss. So there's a lot of pressure on them. But I also think that, they're going to look deep inside. Zuby Ejiofor said after the last game, it's time for everyone to look in the mirror. You got to hope that they're going to.
Yeah, no, and I do trust Zuby to motivate guys. I do trust Rick to motivate guys. And so it is scary because the margin for error is down because not only are those UConn games important for opportunities to get quad one, but if you lose, I even asked Rick after the game earlier this week, I said, hey, so, Kentucky, chance at a quad one game, how do you approach it differently knowing that these metrics are kind of important? He goes, actually, if anything, I've told the guys the opposite, that the metrics are more important when you play the quad 3 and 4, because if you lose those, it's damning. And to get a win is a big one. And yes, they did get their one quad 1 win with Baylor, but they're still missing that signature win. So it's a scary proposition because the room for error is small. And if, they preseason number 5, you're hoping maybe a 2 seed. I don't think that's in the realm of possibility anymore. I think maybe a 3 seed if you sweep Connecticut and don't stumble anywhere along the way, except maybe one or 2 odd games, away from home. But I don't know. It's just a scary proposition. I'm not pressing the panic button, Roger, but I know where it is. I know where the panic button is. So all that being said, there is one more out-of-conference game. Ivy League, known to be feisty at times. What are you expecting? What are you hoping? What do you want to see in this Harvard game to send you into the new year thinking, hey, St. John's can right the ship?
Well, I think that there are a few things that you want to look for. Of course, one of the things that Coach Pitino has said to us over and over again is you win some non-conference game by 30 points, what do you really get out of it? This is an opportunity for this team to show that what happened against Kentucky landed with them, and to be assertive, get physical with Harvard. You want to see some development from Jackson at point guard. You want that continuing trend of development. I'm not sure how much hay you can make with a game like this, but I think what you want to see is the guys in the rotation who are going to be playing responding to the situation that they're in right now and sort of showing that they did what Zuby Ejiofor said. They looked in the mirror and they understand what they need to be.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And while it won't do anything on the stat sheet to have a 40-point win against an Ivy League foe, I want to see a complete game. That's really what I want, because even when you look at Bucknell, when you look at some of the slow starts, and then some of the fast starts, like finally this week against DePaul, a quick start, but then never put the boot on their neck, never had the closer. So what I want to see is a complete game where everyone is following the scouting and being physical. I don't care if it's a 2-point win. I don't care if it's a 200-point win. I want to see those three things for exactly that reason, because we're not going to know, well, is the point guard and the shifting and the matchups, are they working well against this Harvard team? We're not maybe going to know that until a UConn game way later in the season. And so what I want to know is the heart of this team, if it's there. We don't get the video this year of Rick Pitino saying, this is toughness, this is adversity that we had in that beautiful, Red Storm Rising that went viral last year. I want them to get that speech, and if they are getting that speech and they're not responding, then that's an even bigger problem. But I want to see how they do respond, and I want to see that effort, whatever that looks like in a point spread, whatever that looks like in the offense and development. I want all of that effort. And you got to have a nice win. It's 2 days before Christmas. Send the Johnny fans home with a Christmas gift. Roger, thank you again so much for joining me on this holiday episode, World Basketball Day, with Christmas right around the corner. And I could not appreciate you more for joining me during these holidays.
It was great being with you. Thanks for asking.
Of course. And guys, I will send you out with one more clip from Rick Pitino, because it is hard. As I was sitting there watching this Kentucky game and it was unfolding exactly like the end of the Auburn game, another game that made me very frustrated from my fan side, not my reporter side, is, they're still there. These are still the guys we thought they were. This is still the number one transfer class in the country, and there's still plenty to play for. And guess what? You don't have to be a 1 or 2 seed. Other teams win all the time. So let's listen to what Rick had to say about how much he still does believe in this team.
They're a great group of guys. I love them, completely love them. And are they a great team? No, they're not a great team. But we can be a good team, and we can get better and better and better. I don't pay attention to how everybody rates it. This is the problem with today's world, is you got 8 new players. What can you do with them to make them better by the end of the year? Next year we'll have 8 new players. You just got to put the team together and see what happens. But I think by the end of the year, we'll be a formidable, good basketball team. Right now we're not, but I think by the end of the year we can become that.
Never wanted to hear a phrase less in my life any more than 8 new players, but I will never get tired of someone believing in their team and hoping that they come, because that's what the holiday season is all about, faith and belief, and that is what we have right here on Court Storming. Thank you all very much for joining me. We'll be back next week. Happy World Basketball Day. Let us be the first to wish you a happy holidays, and we'll catch you next time on Court Storming.